Well, good afternoon. Welcome to breaking news coverage right here on Edmonton Sports Talk. Tune in, iHeartRadio, YouTube of Edmonton Sports Talk. The Edmonton Elks have announced they've parted ways with general manager and head coach Chris Jones. A press conference scheduled to take place within the next 10 minutes or so as President Rick Lawlisher, interim general manager Geroy Simon, he will take over on an interim basis, and Jarious Jackson, who's the offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach, he's going to take over as the interim head coach. The three of them will speak to the media. We will endeavor to send that or get you the audio at the very least, or at least the video and audio of this. As the Edmonton Elks, they gave a very short notice to everyone when it comes to this news. So a lot of media around the city just having to drop everything to get this going, giving us less than an hour's notice to get this done. So we will do everything we can to try to get you the audio of that press conference at the very least. But worst case, our very own Jay Milne and Tom Gazzola are both at Commonwealth Stadium for this press conference. So we will speak to them after, and we will have Lieutenant Eric momentarily. We'll get his thoughts on this as 0-5 season. The Edmonton Elks finally make this move. Myself and Jay Milne yesterday on the Green and Gold post-game show, we were both saying it was about time. 0-5, it's just enough's enough. This is a team that last year went 0-9 to start this season. They turned things over to Jarious Jackson on the offensive side for the OC. They went with Trey Ford. They went 4-5 the rest of the way. Chris Jones saves his job going into this season, but once again 0-4. He was hired in December of 2021. This is his second stint with the Edmonton Elks. He's 8-33 overall, going 4-14, 4-14, and 0-5. Previously, as a head coach of the Edmonton Elks, he did win a Grey Cup in 2015, and he took the team to a West Final in 2014. But that's back in 2014-15, and this time it wasn't good enough. A change was necessary. Change has come. The Elks getting set to take on the Ottawa Redblacks. It is a short week on Friday, and they will do so with a new interim head coach and a new interim general manager. Matt Iwanyk with you here on Edmonton Sports Talk. Your thoughts, welcome. Nasty chat, or you can text us in the Paris Jewelers inbox, 780-218-9999. Brett B in the Nasty chat saying, I'm shocked. Jeff will be glad to take him as a DC in Hamilton, LOL. Well, Ed Hervey's the general manager in Hamilton. Him and Chris Jones don't exactly get along, so don't expect that taking place. And Spency 5 Sensing, can the Elks pull an Oilers and turn this season around with a coaching change? In the Paris Jewelers inbox, 780-218-9999. Hey, guys, what really pissed me off with Beatty, other than obviously was after the game, walking around smiling, laughing, and shaking hands with the Ottawa players like no big deal. Understand the professionalism part of it, but he wants to see a little bit more care. Boris Beatty may put the final nail in the coffin of Chris Jones as the head coach and general manager of this team with that awful squib kick yesterday that allowed the Ottawa Redblacks to ultimately win that football game. As I mentioned, we will do our best to try to get you the audio at the very least of the press conference, which is coming up in about 6 minutes or so. But right now, let's bring in Lieutenant Eric, who's going to join us as well. Right now, he's at home. We're bringing him on, though. This is a CFL guy. There he is, Lieutenant Eric with us here.
Hey.
Eric, just initially your thoughts on the news of Chris Jones being relieved of his duties as both head coach and general manager of the Edmonton Elks.
Didn't think it was going to happen today. I mean, that certainly caught me off guard, but it needed to happen. I think everybody's kind of echoing the same refrain here. That was a new and inventive way to lose the football game yesterday, and I think catching you on the tail end there and Spency 5 Sensey with the BD text, that's something I've picked up in the past few weeks. I mean, we can track this thing back a couple years, obviously, in the entire tenure, and the number of home wins you can count on one hand. But I just think that there was obviously among a boatload of things, and this goes back to the game in BC. There was a lineman that took a cheap shot in the end zone, clearly just not understanding or not wanting to understand the rule at the time. And Jones, chased him off the field and was berating him, and nobody was paying attention. It just seemed like there was obviously just nobody listening anymore and no real rules in the room, so to speak, just from what I was seeing. Now, yes, the defense and all those things on the field, they're coming close. They have the talent. I think we can all agree on that, roster-wise on paper. And also I heard you mentioning, coaching change and whatever, and our constant comparison to the hockey team and the Oilers, but perhaps for Jarious now and Geroy, with an interim tag, it is kind of, let's see what we can do here. You got a good roster. You don't know what tomorrow holds in terms of new ownership and what their plans might be. So this is an opportunity now for Jarious, and maybe to a lesser extent at this stage of the season, Geroy, to figure things out. And maybe, I mean, getting rid of Jones both in a GM and HC role speak to a lot of things, but I just think in general it's like opening the windows and letting in some fresh air. The disconnect with the fan base was as wide as you can define. You needed a change for change's sake, and I know we're all talking about that being maybe at quarterback this morning, but make that make sense. This was the change that needed to happen, and rightfully so. It happened surprisingly this afternoon.
Yeah, I'd say it's funny because just you go through the morning and the afternoon, a short week, and that's where you're thinking, wow, they're just going to keep it as is. For this to drop it just after like 3 o'clock or something, that's where they caught at least me. I was on with Jamie and I in Saskatchewan. He asked me are any changes coming. I was on at 2:30. I was like, no, it doesn't seem so. Like, look, we're already through the day. What changes could come? Well, you expect Chris Jones, and then less than 30 minutes later, boom, the Edmonton Elks make me look like a fool out in Saskatchewan. I get the ownership part of this is very important to this. I would be stunned if Rick Lawlisher wasn't speaking to whichever owner or owners or prospective owners to get this change done and go forth with this. What was Chris Jones's biggest flaw here? Is it his GM abilities? Was it him as the head coach? Or is this just strictly we talk about this organization and how trying to win over the fans, he basically slapped the fans in the face by not giving them Trey Ford this season and going towards MBT, and that obviously didn't work. What was the biggest flaw of Chris Jones this time around with the Edmonton Elks in your eyes?
Well, there are many flaws, and some could argue bringing him back after he left, and after he left the first time, and that could have been the initial slap in the face for some. I still think that there's a coordinator in there, maybe even a head coach at some stage or level. I mean, it's football, pro sports. You can recycle and reuse. But I just think in the case of him wearing so many hats he did within the organization, getting all the keys with really no checks or balances was the beginning of an undoing. To a guy that, let's be honest, he is a bit unique. He's he comes off a little different, hugely respected in the room. I don't think, to my initial comment earlier, I'm not saying that I don't think he lost the room. I just think that the message obviously goes stale over a certain period of time. But, I just, players-wise, I think it's fine. But the whole disconnect that I felt with the community here, and I used the Rough Rider example of the past, too, at Dickinson. Not to say there's a disconnect, but there was a bit of a lame duck. Same as this. I mean, you knew it was coming. Why wait to do it? But time marches on and you're still left with this person. But then you get somebody that kind of you bring in, it's the dawning of a new day, a chance to implement a culture change or shift. And I think this is a great opportunity now. But just to get back to the question, lots of undoings, I think. I think mainly it comes from wearing too many of those hats. Mm-hmm. I don't fault him in lack of trying. I really don't. I think he you could tell he wore it. I mean, there's no question about time put into this job or that he didn't care. But maybe at the end it was too much, and he believed in himself a little too much to do all of those jobs a certain way, the right way.
You're right. This is a guy that does care. He wants to win. He came back to Edmonton with the mentality he wanted to be the new Wally Buono, which is build a winner and be somewhere for a long period of time. And I was one of those people that actually believed him when he said that. I know there's a lot of people in Edmonton that didn't think that at all because they were frustrated with him bolting to the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. What I'll be fascinated to see, Eric, is that when we look at we saw the Oilers connection, Chris Knobloch coming in. The one thing we know about Chris Jones is players love Chris Jones. Players love to play for Chris Jones. And for any player out there that now will have to look at themselves and go, well, we got a coach that we really like fired. Does that kickstart them? Does that get them the wins? Does that motivate them just a little bit more? And will we see the results a little bit better? Because ultimately, one of the biggest reasons that the Edmonton Elks are where they are this season is they shot themselves in the foot too much. And you can make the argument that's not on Chris Jones. That's on the players for making that error. So maybe this is just one of those cases where the fact that it's a coach that they all like playing for is gone. That might turn this season around just in itself by, that a good coach just lost his job in their eyes.
You get maybe and I'm just wondering because we always say the attention to detail stuff. I mentioned him going after the guy and seeming like it just. So attention to detail, penalties, those things. I keep going back to last season too in Regina with when the player Sims didn't take it out of the end zone.
Yeah.
Yesterday beating all of these little minute is that. Now, you can argue both. You could say the players, I mean, ultimately it comes down to execution. If Beattie does what he should and can do yesterday, but they let him down in that moment, or is it the call in the moment? And I do think it can be a little of both when it comes to Jones. Like all of these moments, these penalties, issues like that, the much like the defense that he's been made a career off of. That was the weak point. That was ultimately one of, well, you could say on field, the major undoing of this team thus far this year. So, like, in terms of, like, I think you get a bit of a bump. Obviously, it's a kick to the backside. We said the team's talented roster-wise. There shouldn't be any reason. And they've been in games. They're not getting pounded here. Let's be honest. Let's be real. But it's those attention to detail. So maybe this does give them a kickstart. But until you start fundamentally changing whatever routine you had during the week, whether it's in film or whatever, to correct these issues, the preaching every week to get better just gets old after a while. So I do wonder what Jarious, has in store. Of course, changing coaches mid-football season is never easy, especially when you have new ownership coming in. So I think they can use it as a bit of a rallying point, I'd say, the coaching staff, because, again, as I mentioned earlier, tomorrow's not guaranteed for them. They have a good roster they've inherited. So I think you get the boys in the room and say, look, we're what we are, but the season is far from over. We have the team. Let's go give it a shot. Let's give it a try. And you're playing with almost then a looseness, but you have to corral it again and shore up these mistakes. It doesn't matter if Jones is coaching or Jackson or Geroy or you or me. But if you're not clearing those up, whether, again, it's more of a player side or a coaching issue or just a routine during the week, then those things won't be going away, and you'll continue to lose games like you have been.
Yeah, and you brought up a little bit earlier, too. For Jarious Jackson and for, Geroy Simon, they're interns. That's what they're being brought in as interns. There will be new ownership. There will be a new president eventually of this team. This is a show me for them, too. If you Geroy Simon, you want to be a GM in this league. If you're Jarious Jackson, you want to be...
You inherit a good team.
Yeah.
Like this isn't, when you get your shot and you're brought in, maybe if they came from a different organization and the team was actual, dog crap on a roster or whatever, or you're walking into a terrible situation where there's this isn't necessarily a bad situation that these guys are inheriting.
No, and that's the thing. And so you go try to earn maybe being the new coach of this team if you're Jarious Jackson. Maybe you could remain, you go rattle off, 6-7 wins the rest of this season. We'll see if maybe, that could keep you your job. And Geroy, maybe you could turn things around with some moves. Jay's maybe connected to the audio board, so send him that link, Zach. Sorry, behind the scenes there. Maybe we can get the audio through Jay's board there. Do you think we'll at all see Trey Ford come in for this week?
Ooh. But I maybe. I would put him in packages for sure. I just don't see the need to, go from him now. And I know the record is what the record is, but I just, until the defense shores up, I'm not all for it. Do I think it'll happen? Sure. I think anything's possible now, which is kind of fun for a team. Let's see what we can do. Put them in some packages, some device, some schemes. Why not?
Sorry, I'm just. I think we might. TSN might have the video of it, Zach. So you might want to just keep an eye on TSN as well for that. The thing I showed you earlier. If you click at the very top of your screen, we're programming live here with this breaking news. No, there you go. Go scroll up, and there says scroll up, not down, up. There you go on that red bar. No, lower. Jeez. Zach, it says right there you go. Click that guy.
Go, Zach. Go, Zach.
He figured out. So we'll see if maybe something could load up there and we'll be able to get you the press conference as well. Eric, any final thoughts on this coaching change? Otherwise, I will let you go right away here.
Yeah, and please bring me back on if you want a little later. I'm just surprised and shocked. And I mean, again, we're opening the windows here. I think this is very exciting. A lot of emotions, but I think this is step one in a long process here to kind of get things back on track, and excited for what the future holds both tomorrow and today with, as we said, Jarious a point to prove now with this roster.
Eric, thanks for taking the time. We'll have Jay and Tommy after the press conference, but I'm sure you, Dusty, and YTT will have a lot to discuss tomorrow morning on the Nielson Show at 6 a.m. In this regarding this change, but thank you for the time.
Thank you.
That's Lieutenant Eric, as I said, Nielson Show, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. YouTube Trev, Dustin Nielson. They will have a lot to discuss. If you're just tuning in to Edmonton Sports Talk right now, if you're looking for the audio stream of, I guess it would have been the Hangout right now or something like that, camera, it would have been a Lock Shop right now. But instead, you're hearing me, Matt Iwanyk, and you're hearing there, Lieutenant Eric. We're getting close to that press conference right away here. The Edmonton Elks, they've relieved Chris Jones of his duties as both head coach, general manager, president of the football team. Jarious Jackson, he's being named as the interim head coach, while Geroy Simon is being named as the interim general manager. The Rick Lawlisher is just getting to the podium right away here, so we'll hopefully get that audio for you very, very shortly here. I think I could maybe grab. You want to know something, Zach, right now? Just send that over because we hear Rick Lawlisher, and I will come and fix this. But here's Rick Lawlisher, president of the Edmonton Elks.
That we have a better team than we had last year, but at the end of the day, we're still 0-5. So the time was, let's get on with it, and we have not given up in this year at all.
So what's happened? I mean, there's a lot of optimism going into this season that there's going to be improvements in terms of the record. There's been, in your opinion, what's happened?
I'm not the football guy to tell you, but I've got enough experience to know usually it's 5 or 6 plays in a game that will either make you or break you. And it's those 5 or 6 plays this year that have been breaking us to some mental mistakes, some bad penalties at different times. And man, I haven't checked, but I just have to believe that 3 walk-off losses in a row have never happened again in this, or before in the CFL. It has to be a record.
Rick, was this decision something that, I'm assuming not spur of the moment, but I just want to get your thoughts on this. Was it something that you started thinking about a few weeks in? Was it something that was on your mind heading into the season that maybe it is a possibility, or was it after how things went down last night, you're like, this is it, I think this is the way to solve this?
Yeah, when you're in sort of a position, I guess, like mine here, do you think about it? We're coming out of last year, we didn't make the playoffs, so that's one measurement to me, is there's always the goal of making the playoffs, and then the second goal is hosting a playoff game. And when that doesn't happen, you think about them. So as we went through, and the Saskatchewan game was the first game, we played pretty well, and then, you know, when you've got 3 walk-off losses in a row, something is wrong, and we got to get it right. So it's going to be up to to Geroy and to Jarious and the other coaches, and then the players. It'll happen in that room, and I think it's a good bunch of players. Chris had not lost the locker room, like sometimes you know in a coaching thing where a coach has lost the locker room. So the players are fully committed to work this through, and they're not giving up on this year as well.
Rick, on the business side, obviously, you know, the team still has empty seats. How important is that to turn this around? When you think about, too, about fan interest, getting wins to get more people in the stadium.
Sure, no, absolutely. First of all, it's a big stadium to get a lot of fans into, and I think seeing yesterday, walking around, like the fans had a great time yesterday. Our team did a super job on the Dino Day, and there was a lot of kids here, and the fans had a lot of fun. But then we lost, and that goes into the record. I think if you talk to the avid hardcore fans, they know that we're a better team than we were last year. But to the average fan coming in, you hear it on the news, you read it in the newspaper, we're 0-5. So at the end of the day, it's the fans and that fill the seats that help pay everybody on this organization.
Rick, I just want to bring this out here because there's some chatter about, is this influenced by ownership coming in? And remind people, there isn't a new owner yet, but is this strictly a Rick Lawlisher decision for 2024?
Yes. It was my decision. I shared it with our board this morning, and I've shared it with any potential owner that this franchise going forward. And they all know the reasons, the rationale, and have agreed with my recommendation. And so we're not giving up on this year. There's still a lot of football to go, and usually you break it into thirds. We still got one game to go in the first third, and then we got 2 thirds to go. So it'll be up to these guys in the locker room to move it forward.
Rick, I know you said you worked with Geroy and Jarious in the past. What attributes do you like in both men that you have faith in them going forward for the rest of the year?
They are both totally committed, and will do everything they can to make the decisions going forward to win games. And they're very positive, and they'll work with Geroy, work with the personnel guys, and Jarious will work with the coaches, and they'll put a game plan together that will bring us some wins.
Anything else for Rick?
Okay.
Interim GM,
Geroy.
Geroy Simon.
Good afternoon. Geroy, how tough is this to be standing here on 5 and having to fire a coach and a GM?
Yeah, it's tough. Chris has given me a great opportunity to come here to Edmonton and work and learn under him. But we are where we are, and it's time to try to turn this thing around. Just in sitting here after Rick made a decision, I looked at the roster, I looked at the staff, and there isn't a lot that needs to be changed. There will be a few tweaks, but for right now, we're going to move forward and try to get our first win.
Geroy, what kind of things can a new GM coming in week 6 do to try to steer the ship in the right direction from your experience in this league where you've seen crazy comebacks since?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was a part of a crazy turnaround in the past. So I feel confident in our roster. I feel confident in Jarious and in the staff that we have. So I'm just looking forward to getting the opportunity to go out and play another game. And like I said, we're going to do everything in our power to get our first win and get this thing going in the right direction.
You've been a part of the management team, obviously. What can you say about the guys you do have on the roster? Because from the outside looking in, there's some pretty talented ballers out there.
Yeah, we have a talented roster. I mean, I think we have the guys in the room, and guys are positive. They're we set out on what we accomplished and getting bigger, faster, stronger. Now we got to play a little bit smarter and find a way to win at the end of games.
I would ask what you think of Jarious as a coach, as he's developed as a coach as well.
I mean, I've known Jarious for over 20 years now. He was my roommate in BC. All the years that we played together, play a little bit smart. I have the total utmost confidence in what he can bring to this club as a head coach, and I'm very confident in what he does as not only a play caller but as a person and as a leader.
Day-to-day work just work really tight on personnel decisions, plays and stuff like that. Is that kind of the relationship you guys have?
I won't have any input on play calling, but I will on personnel, and we'll work together.
Is there any deadline set for a permanent head coach?
No, we're just going to try to win this week.
Geroy, in terms of the coaching staff, is the coaching staff they have in place right now going to be the coaching staff for the rest of the year? Like, are you going to look to bring in anybody else? Help with the offense or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, we'll see where we're at. I think right now it's a short week. We got to prepare for Ottawa. We travel in a few days, so right now we're gonna stay status quo. But I'm sure there will be some tweaks moving forward. But nothing. There won't be any wholesale changes.
Let's call from Geroy. All right. And Coach
Thanks, guys.
Jarious Jackson.
Hey, good afternoon.
Well, Jarious, tell me about taking on this role in a short week, no less. But you get to hit the ground running right away here.
Yeah, definitely got to hit the ground running. It's definitely a tough situation. It was kind of, brought to my attention last year. I was standing up here around the same time for a different reason, right? So, it's unfortunate, but when you're the head coach, the blame is put on you when things don't go well, and when things do, you try to give all of that to everybody else to try to disperse it out. But it's definitely, a tough day. I think we're all in shock right now, but at the end of the day, we got to lace our boots up and keep pushing forward.
What do you want to bring in right away that maybe you didn't see happening, or just bringing your own kind of stamp on things to help the players?
Well, for me, it's all about being positive and having hope, right? I think this is, an opportunity for me that has come about. I don't think, when you get your opportunities, you got to take advantage of them, right? And so for me as a player, I had that kind of mentality, and that's my mentality going into this. And for me, the players, that they believe, the locker room is still together, and I just want them to have hope and push forward and know that we can get wins going down the stretch here. We've only had almost a third of the season so far, so there's still a lot of football left to be played.
There's teams that are 0-5, and there's this team that's 0-5. There's been no blowout losses. They've all been one-score games. So, do you feel that this team's record is really a reflection of where they're at?
No, I don't. But we are 0-5, right? We don't get any brownie points for keeping games close, right? It's about the W's. At the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. Stats don't matter. How many touchdowns you had. It's all about getting the W at the end of the day, and that's what we need to be focused on.
Jarious, how much time goes to Jarious head coach versus Jarious the OC, or have you even thought about that yet?
I haven't thought about that yet. It's all, like I said, it's all happened pretty fast right now. I know there's going to be, more responsibility put on my shoulder, and that's fine. I've dealt with it before. I think I have a great staff. I have a great supporting cast around me, and we'll get it done. We'll get it done.
Can you tap into your time as a QB, leading a group, leading a coaching staff, as well as the players and all the other staff as well?
I think it goes hand in hand, right? Again, this is new territory for me from that standpoint, but at the same time, I've been here as the OC since last year. I've OC'd in other places, so again, just taking on more responsibility, but at the same time, definitely going to lean on my staff as well.
When Jerry talked about we need to help the players think the game better in key moments, they lost the same way 3 games in a row, which is remarkable. How do you do that? Is that a week of preparation? Is that providing maybe a little more structure? Is that simplifying things?
Well, I just think, we stay the course. There are definitely going to be some tweaks on how we go about doing things, and whether that's practice or different things of that nature as far as, our day-to-day operations. So we may tweak a few things here and there, but hopefully it'll be tweaks that'll help the guys stay focused, and tweaks that'll help them be fresh going into the game, and, put them in all the different situations that they need to be successful.
There are people that are thinking now, okay, coach changed. That means a change of quarterback. So I'm just going to ask.
Right. No, it's not a change in quarterback. There may be some tweaks, like I said before, on how we go about doing things, but McLeod is still our quarterback. I believe in Dakota, and I believe in Trey. So, hopefully, somewhere or another we'll figure out if we need to get all the guys on the field at some form or fashion. Like back when I played, G-Rush spoke on a little bit in BC. All 3 of us played. All 3 of us had a role. So that may be one of the things that I may look into, but we'll see going forward.
Anything else for Jarious? All right, we can do a couple of one-on-ones if people need a little bit more. Thank you.
That's you'll have to just bring my mic down, I think, a little bit there, Zach. That was we heard from the president, president of the Edmonton Elks, Rick Lawlisher. We heard from now interim general manager Geroy Simon, and interim head coach Jarious Jackson here on EdmontonSportsTalk.com. As today, the Edmonton Elks, they relieve Chris Jones of his duties as head coach, general manager, president of football operations. You heard Tommy down there at the presser. He was loading up with all the questions, the majority of the questions. He was down there for us with EST, as is glue guy Jay Milne. We'll try to endeavor to reach those 2 guys and talk to them. Zach, I think we'll see what the boys say, but we'll try to go Tommy first and then Jay second, if that is possible. Once again, Chris Jones, hired in December of 2021, 8-33 record, and he gets fired today. I want to jump into the nasty chat momentarily here, but this from TSN's Farhan Lalji, because I know this was out there. Rick Lawlisher did did mention it. The prospective Elks new owners did sign off on this move to fire Jones. Rick Lawlisher did mention there that this was his decision alone. He went about trying to turn this season around, but he did go to the board of the Elks as well as the prospective new owners, and they did sign off on this. When you look at, everyone knows about the coaching cap and how much, that's the reason Chris Jones is here ultimately, is that the Elks were in a coaching cap situation in hell, and they brought on a guy who could do multiple roles to save some cash. Obviously, that has not worked out. Farhan Lalji of TSN adding, contractually, the team is obligated to pay Jones for 12 months from the date of termination. So that only means 5/18 of his 2025 salary would be owned and applied to the cap. So the Edmonton Elks, to start this season, I guess, would be in a little bit of a predicament, if you will. But it'll be very quick that they will be able to get out of cap situation. I know Geroy Simon was asked there, how soon would they till they hire a general manager? I'll say this: I don't think Geroy Simon doesn't get a chance to hire a head coach here because he's also just an interim. And we will at some point in the next few weeks, maybe a month or so, we will hear about a new owner coming into taking over the Edmonton Elks. I'm expecting they'll probably have a president, and that group or that individual, they will go out and they will make a determination on who's going to be the general manager of this team, whether that's Geroy or not. And after that, then you go hire the head coach. So this is all about salvaging this season. I will point out to one thing that Jarious Jackson did say there at the very end. No quarterback change coming to the Edmonton Elks. But he did say something, maybe how they go about things will be a little differently. And I will pick up on that little comment right there from Jarious Jackson, is that he believes he says an MBT, but also Prukop and Trey Ford. Does that mean maybe he was a little bit different from Chris Jones and he wants to put in some packages with Trey Ford? Is that a change that we're going to be seeing? Is that a way that Jarious Jackson's going to go about things, doing things a little bit differently? Trying to mix Trey Ford in there. And Chris Jones last week, he basically threw Trey Ford on the bus for absolutely no reason and said Trey Ford doesn't want to, they've gone to him to try to put him in packages, and he has said no. That's probably because I'm pretty confident that's because Chris Jones wanted him to play gimmick plays, wanted him to be just a runner or something like that, not to be an actual quarterback. Maybe Jarious Jackson will do things differently. I won't lie. I haven't been thrilled by Jarious Jackson's offensive play callings through 5 weeks. Maybe that has been influenced by a head coach. But last year, when Trey Ford took over the starting role and Jarious Jackson took over as the offensive coordinator from Steve McAdoo, we saw an offense really do quite well. We saw the running game open up. We obviously saw Trey Ford be Trey Ford, and they went and won football games. Is this going to are we going to see a similar type change when it comes to the offense here? In one sense of, they have been able to move the ball and they have been able to put up points. But, like you go to yesterday's game, they scored 2 touchdowns early. Then there was a good chunk of the game where they didn't do anything pretty much offensively. And then they got 2 touchdowns late. Where's that consistency throughout the game of being able to move the football? Is that going to open things up for Kevin Brown with the way Jarious Jackson calls things? Is he going to call a little bit more runs? And will there be some packages for Trey Ford? Will we go back to being a less predictable offense? Like with Steve McAdoo, it was very predictable. It was very bland. Second half of the season when Jarious Jackson was the offensive coordinator, it wasn't that. It wasn't that at all. But to start this season, Jarious Jackson, a lot of the messages we were getting in the postgame show yesterday, the messages we were getting throughout the day today was, he's been trained by Steve McAdoo. And that's where it's just been puzzling as to why Jarious Jackson has kind of regressed as an OC. But maybe that was other reasons that occurred. So we'll now have to wait and see. The one concern I will have when it comes to Jarious Jackson, though, a lot of roles, a lot of hats on his head. We had that issue with Chris Jones, we all feel. President, general manager, head coach, up until this season, also defensive coordinator. Well, Jarious Jackson has never been a head coach. Jarious Jackson, he's got to be the head coach, he's got to be the offensive coordinator, and he's got to be the quarterback coach. And he will be maintaining the play-calling duties of the offense. So we'll see. I would really hope that he's now just going to, it's almost like we have 2 head coaches here in Edmonton at this moment. That Jarious Jackson, he gets the final say. He gets to make the final decisions on the big moments, especially if they want to go for it on 3rd down, if they want to fake it, whatever it might be. This falls on Jarious Jackson's feet or at his feet. But I'm hoping he allows Jason Shivers to just deal with the defense. I'm hoping he allows Jason Shivers to just be the defensive coordinator, coach it however he wants to. Because if Jarious Jackson tries to get involved a little bit too much on the defense, I think he just has too many hats, and that's going to be a big problem for the Edmonton Elks moving forward. Again, for those that are just tuning in to Edmonton Sports Talk, your clear choice for Edmonton Sports. The Edmonton Elks have relieved Chris Jones of his duties. Jarious Jackson taken over as interim head coach. Geroy Simon as interim general manager. Rick Lawlisher making this decision today in the press release, saying, quote, Chris worked extremely hard to improve our football team over the last several seasons, and we thank him for that. There's no question we're a better team today than we were the previous 2 seasons, but ultimately this is a results-based business, and the wins haven't materialized, end quote there. That's from the press release. I know Jarious Jackson at one point, he said we're all in shock today about this move, and Spency 5 cents he caught on what I caught on there in the nasty chat going, are you sure about that? I'm only shocked about it because I didn't think it would happen, but you can't be shocked that it did happen. There's no one out there that could right now defend Chris Jones and say he didn't deserve to lose his job ultimately. Like, look, you don't want anyone to lose their job, but this is sports, and as Rick Lawlisher had said there, it's a result-based business. But no one should be shocked that a team that went 0-9 last season to start the season, a team that's 0-5 to start this season, a head coach that has a combined record of 8-33, a guy that has won in those 41 games as a head coach, he's only won 2 home games. It's no surprise that he's been let go today. And that's where obviously they're close. Chris Jones, as he is with his players, with his coaching staff, he's obviously very close. So that's going to obviously, unnerve and rattle some of the people in the organization. But no one should be shocked today that we are seeing a change. As Jason B saying, I'm more shocked that it happened so late in the day. And that's, for those that have missed it, I said it with Lieutenant Eric. I was on Saskatchewan radio at 2:35 today, and I was asked, are the changes coming? And I went, no. Like, how could there be now? If it didn't happen this morning and this afternoon, early this afternoon, the Elks play on Friday. They play at 5 o'clock out in Ottawa. It's a short week. How is the change going to happen? And then 3 o'clock this happened. So that got me. I was not expecting that at all. None of us here at EST were expecting this at all. Thanks to Glue Guy and Tommy for rushing down to Commonwealth Stadium to be there for this press conference. And thankfully, Zach is still here doing hard work and doing an excellent job behind the camera, getting things set up here. But it just completely, that's the shocking part, that it came at this moment late in the afternoon, and it wasn't something that happened earlier. But beyond that, there is no real shock that this occurred. Still in the nasty chat, Jody saying they can't bring in another coach, can they? Where Joe Balaneski, they can, but who? At this point, if you're going with Jarious Jackson's interim, you just let this be for the rest of the season. If you wanted an outside voice, the interim I would have looked for, and I don't know if you could have done it, would have been Kahari Jones. That would have been the way I look at this. But as of now, I think since this is the way Rick Lawlisher went about it, and with the prospective new owners coming here, the way you have to see how this timeline now is going to play out is at some point, the new ownership is going to be announced. And Murray McCourt on the Hangout a couple of weeks ago said he thinks it's a singular owner that is buying this. It's not a group. It's a singular owner that will take over this organization. You would like to think that they've already got it figured out, but they'll hire a new president of this club, both business and football ops. Rick Lawlisher is here just to transition people over, but they'll hire a president. That president will then take his time to evaluate, depending on if they hire a football ops or a business ops combined or if they separate them. But if it's combined, they'll have to evaluate everything in this organization, from business side to the football side. And they'll have to evaluate whether Geroy Simon is the guy to be the general manager of this team moving forward, or if they're going to need to go and hire somebody else and go outside and do a full interview process. My vote goes for the full interview process, not going to lie. That then general manager will get to make the decision on the next head coach, whether that be Jarious Jackson or whether that be a full hiring process as well and full interview process. But that's the way this all will have to take place. So the next shoe to drop will be ownership at some point, and whoever the owner is, the media will get a chance to ask them the questions of, what do you think, how do you want to go about and seeing this? And then that's the person that's going to be ultimately making the next decision on who's going to be the president of this team, but also who's going to be the general manager and head coach of this team. And also we'll just, when you're Jarious Jackson, you're Geroy Simon, this is a show me time for you. You got to go out there and try to earn this job, because you are just an intern, and it's very easy for the new owner to come in and just clean house. But if you're Geroy Simon, you make some nice moves here to improve this team, or if you're Jarious Jackson and you get the winning going here, it'd be hard to let you go. And then most notably, I'm looking at Jarious Jackson this one. If the Edmonton Elks can go rattle off quite a few victories the rest of this season, if they could get into a playoff hunt, who knows? Maybe get into the playoffs because, ultimately this is probably the best 0-5 football team I may have ever seen. Now, in the end, they're still 0-5. And the record is who they are, and that's why today is happening, and that's why yesterday on the postgame show I said today needed to happen in this case. But there is some talent here. They've been very close. Maybe Jarious Jackson can unlock that. Maybe Jarious Jackson is that guy to get this team to correct their mistakes. And if that is the case, and maybe they win, and maybe then he earns this job. They're playing for their jobs now too, the coaching staff. Everyone in this it's sad that we're at this again. It's sad that we're in this situation again, saying everyone is playing for their jobs, but we're here yet again. Chris Jones came in to try to correct this organization. It is in a better spot. I don't think that it says much, though, because it was in just a horrendous spot when he took over. It is in a better spot, but is it that much better? Is it infinitely better? Well, the record right now says it's not, and we will have to see. I will still say that be fascinating to just see how the quarterbacking situation plays out. MBT deserves the starting job on Friday, especially now. I will say that. He hasn't been terrible. He's not the biggest reason why this team is 0-5. That's on defense. The defense has been just garbage. Special teams-wise, Boris Beatty has missed a couple of big kicks. Javon Leake, he's a special teams guy, but in offense, he's fumbled too often and in such crucial times, and it's cost the team dearly. That's the biggest reasons why the team's 0-5. But the flip side to all of that is he's not the reason they have wins. He hasn't been able to get them wins. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson was brought in for wins. And it's fascinating just that now, in the end, the undoing of Chris Jones is Trey Ford. Trey Ford kept his job. Chris Jones, this day should have come last offseason. But Trey Ford goes into the starting role, and he wins 4 football games for this club. And myself and a number of you out there, we all thought, hey, there you go. Trey Ford will be the starting quarterback of this team in 2024. Go hire and go get an offensive line. Go build a little bit of this team, and let's see what happens. You want to know something? If this team was 0-5 right now with Trey Ford as their starting quarterback, I think there's a chance Chris Jones still has his job, actually. Because I sit there and I would think that you at least could go out there, the fan base would understand you're trying to develop a quarterback. Here, you went in at Chris Jones because you didn't want to go with Trey Ford. You went in there saying, we're going to win this season. And you didn't win, and that's why you lost your job here. I do wonder if we were in a different timeline and Trey Ford was the starting quarterback this season, if maybe Chris Jones would have been given a little bit more leash, because that's what the fans wanted. The fans wanted to see him, and you would have been trying to develop a quarterback. We will head down momentarily to Commonwealth. Are we going to try to get both boys in there? Because they're both sitting there, aren't they?
I mean, we can if both of the boys want to. They're sitting right beside each other.
Just text the boys to see how they want to do this. Are both going to be in there, or is it just going to be one in there? I don't know if they could do both, but let's see what they're doing, and then we'll head down to Commonwealth Stadium as Tom Gazzola was there, as was Jay Milne, and get their thoughts on what happened. Once again, for those just tuning in, Chris Jones no longer with the Edmonton Elks. A lot of people are excited about that decision. I know in the city of Edmonton, it's still, it's always tough seeing someone lose their job, but the record speaks for itself. Jarious Jackson, the interim head coach of this team, and Geroy Simon will be the interim general manager of this team. As Rick Lawler did mention, Farhan Lalji also having this, the prospective new owners did sign off on this move for Trey Ford. And Farhan Lalji also adding, I fully expect Elks to split the GM and head coach role with their next hire. The joint job, given their cap situation, was a key factor in hiring Jones. So now that shouldn't be as much of a factor. We just got Tommy didn't respond. Tommy says he's ready to go after Zach going, you guys both want to join? Yeah, Tommy, Jay, I'm sure you can hear me right now. Are you able to both be on at the exact same time, or just doing one of you? Give me a thumbs up to if you're both going on. Okay, let's bring them both in. Let's see if this will work. We're heading down to Commonwealth Stadium. Just unmute them, send them over. Tom Gazzola, Jay Milne down there. Boys, can you hear me? Can I hear you?
Loud and clear, buddy.
Hey, I could hear. Okay, perfect. I didn't know if it was just going to be one of you or both of you. Great job to both of you getting down there and representing ESD. Tommy, excellent job asking the questions and kind of leading the press conference there. I'll start with you. Your biggest takeaway of the press conference, of what any of them had to say, but maybe most notably Rick Lawlisher.
Yeah, Rick Lawlisher didn't really hold back, and he, I think, said what everybody was thinking too. And I don't think Rick Lawlisher had the patience to wait another 6 weeks to make a move. I think they're sincere and genuine in saying they want to turn this season around immediately. And sometimes you need to spur that on with a change. And that change is the coach and GM, a guy who's got his fingerprints all over this team, and a guy that ultimately, when the team has failures and not successes, ends up dying on the sword. We see it in hockey. We see it in football. This isn't new to the CFL. It's not new to football in general. And so I don't think Rick Lawlisher was mincing words, and he just wanted to see this team obviously start to get wins, and he feels the way he can do that and the tool that he can use to provide that change is by getting a new voice to lead the group, or new voices. So, Chris Jones and his legacy here obviously has changed over the last 3 years. Matty, you tweeted out the team's record and the lack of success, and the home record has been abysmal. We know that. The organization's gone through a lot of turmoil. There is a fan base here that wants to see this group have success. It just isn't happening. So, after that tough loss again last night, this is the tool that Rick Lawlisher possesses to try to change things, and he's going to use it, and let's see if it has the right effect.
Jay, you are my co-host on the Green and Gold Kickoff post-game shows. Your thoughts on this move when bringing Jarious Jackson and Geroy Simon into interim roles and getting rid of Chris Jones?
Well, as we, talked about last night, something needed to change. And we didn't quite know what it was, but I think the overwhelming sense was that Chris Jones was going to be relieved of his duties. That has come to fruition. And I want to touch on a few things that Rick said, specifically that he wanted to make it very clear that they are not giving up on this season. Even though they are 0-5, they're not quite a third of the way through the season. He wanted to make it very clear that they still expect a run out of this team. He also mentioned the 3 walk-off losses in a row and how strange that is to have happen, but he also admitted that they have to make that right. Not addressing that and not doing what they've done today would have been a mistake organizationally. So it was I don't know, it felt relieving to hear somebody take a little bit of ownership and say, no, this is not good enough. We need to be better. And moving forward, it looks like things are in good hands. I mean, what Jarious had to say was, well, Geroy said it's up to Jarious. It's his team now. Mm-hmm. He said there's not going to be, this is Geroy Simon, the new acting GM. He said there's not going to be any wholesale changes, a few tweaks here and there, but they're going ahead status quo. They're going ahead with the same team. McLeod Bethel-Thompson is still the starter. But I will tell you one thing I am 100% certain of. Trey Ford will be taking snaps for the Elks moving forward. I could sense that from Geroy's press conference. I could sense it overwhelmingly from Tom's individual hit with him. So this answers a question as to where the decision came from to not include Trey Ford in any package styles. Well, I think we've got your answer now, because in what Jarious Jackson said, they will be tweaking that. And he said it himself. When they were in BC, all 3 quarterbacks played during the same game, and they had their own roles. So he alluded to that. So I know for all the Trey Ford fans, which I know there's a lot of. Matthew,
President over here. President over here.
Yeah, President and coup of the Trey Ford fan club. This is a good thing for you today.
Well, and I go to, I'm being very intrigued. Can't wait to watch the one-on-one Tommy has with Jarious Jackson. But right at the end of him talking with the entire media in the press conference there, he did say that this is MBT. He's the starting quarterback. But like he mentioned, he likes all 3 quarterbacks. And there was a hint there of there will be some changes in the sense of we'll see him more. So I think you're right, Jay. It kind of does explain why. Who was the one that didn't want to get Trey Ford on the field? Who was the one that didn't want to mix Trey Ford in on some of the packages? It kind of feels like we were led in a direction of not exactly, it's right there, but hey, it's over there if you want to look at this. Yeah. Do either of you guys have any concerns, though, about Jarious Jackson having multiple roles here? He's now the interim head coach, but he's also still the OC, calling plays, and the quarterback coach. Does that concern either of you two? I'll start with you, Jay, and then go to Tommy on that.
I must admit, I felt like asking, but I didn't. I held back. But I felt like asking, okay, you've got an offense that's putting up numbers, good numbers, but you've got a defense that gives up more numbers. And now you went from OC to just taking care of that to now that's your job. That's your unit as well. So I'd like to know how he's going to address that with his defensive coordinator, Jason Shivers. I would imagine for the next, 24 to 36 hours, there's going to be a lot of coaches' meetings, a lot of film work, and trying to see how they can, with the personnel they have, because it is a short week. So, Geroy did mention that there would be a few tweaks within the club, but this is a short week. They're going to ride with who they got right now. So that needs to be addressed. It's a totally different change from 24 hours ago for Jarious Jackson.
Yeah. Tommy, you got concerned that Jarious has got multiple hats on as a guy who's never been a head coach before?
Naturally, yes. As a football fan and observer of the game, of course, because we see sometimes it could be overwhelming for some veteran coaches of this league, of other leagues, to have dual roles like that. And, Chris Jones wore a bunch of hats. And if there was any guy in the league that people could generally look at and trust to wear multiple hats on a coaching staff, it was him. And I think, in this stint, he struggled with that. So I think naturally we would say yes. Jarious Jackson being OC and HC is going to be a tough hill to climb. But it doesn't seem like he's discouraged by it. He understands that it's going to be hard. I think he also indicated to us, not by just flat out saying it, but, using some choice phrases, that he's got a group around him that's going to support him as much as possible. That includes Jason Shivers, obviously, as well, who I'm sure there will be meetings, because Jarious did also mention that they do need some big plays from the defense. They clearly didn't get those last night. They didn't get it in weeks past where they needed a big stop. And I think Jarious Jackson is probably the guy that would say our offense needs to keep the ball moving forward and stay on the field a little bit longer so that the defense can rest. So it seems like this guy's not an idiot. He knows what he's doing. He's been around this league for a long time. This has been put on them. They're clearly willing to take it on and try to make it work. Doesn't sound like there's any additions to the coaching staff that are going to happen to help alleviate some of those stresses. They're going to have to work with what's in that room, and they're going to have to put on the big boy pants and pull up their bootstraps and get to work. It's not going to be easy, but at least it sounds like there's a willingness to do it. And to their credit, Maddie, like, they've been in this league, as we know, for decades. Mm-hmm. These are guys who know this game inside and out. Now they're going to be tested. This is their chance to rise to the occasion. Let's see what happens.
Now, Maddie, might I add, though, because one thing I was a real strong takeaway from me from this press conference with Geroy Simon and Jarious Jackson speaking at separate times, and then with Tom after, was the confidence they both exuded. This was not something that they didn't have a look in their eye that said, "Oh wow, this has been
no deer in headlights."
This has been a long 12 hours. Yeah. No, this was a sign of two guys and Tom congratulated both of them individually on becoming a GM and a head coach, and they both were proud to say, yeah, that's right. I am the head coach and I am the GM. So I would say, as far as the decision for head coach, I believe we would all say it was down to Jason Shivers or Jarious Jackson.
Yeah.
Jarious Jackson has been around Rick Lawlisher longer, and there's a more of a rapport there. Yeah. And I think the right decision was made now. And the only thing as an Elks fan that you can ask for is that this is a shakeup that's needed in the locker room to get them over the edge, because we all know it's so close. But as Jarious Jackson said affirmatively, we are still 0-5. He recognizes that. There's no participation ribbons that are given out for being close losses. So I was very happy with the confidence that they both exuded.
I want to bounce off of Jay really quickly this thought. I wonder, this is just my mind thinking out loud, I wonder if this change does send the type of shockwave where whatever isn't clicking, let's say defensively, and there's a mental lapse and a breakdown or something like that. I wonder if this change, this shockwave, kind of reins the guys in to recognize and in-game be a little bit more dialed in. And they do get that stop, or they do come up with that big play, or they don't lose a step to a receiver. And
or they don't kick the ball out of bounds.
They don't kick the ball out. That was brought up unprompted. I didn't bring it up. By Jarious Jackson today, and they know, like, those are bad mistakes, and maybe this kick in the pants.
Well, you wonder if that's one of those tweaks that they were talking about, and send shockwaves, literal shockwaves through the locker room, and make adjustments of play that is unacceptable. And if you want to, like you say, put your big boy pants on and make moves that are going to wake the locker room up and affect positive change, sometimes hard decisions need to be made. And they both alluded that there are tweaks that are going to be happening.
One other thing, I don't know if it was just on the post-game show yesterday we brought this up, or if it was also brought up on the Hangout today, but, just correcting this with the players and sending those shockwaves. What we do know about Chris Jones is players love playing for him. Players love to be coached by Chris Jones. I even just remember having Odell Willis on in the Hangout when we were at Century Casino that one day, Jay, and we asked him about coaching for Chris Jones. Now that his job was lost, is that shockwave that snaps him in place and go, oh boy, this isn't a coach we really like playing for isn't here anymore. And that's because we haven't had that attention to detail, or we haven't been exactly as crisp as we're supposed to be. And look how close we would have been. And what could have been had we just been a little bit sharper. Let's turn this season around. And maybe that's the shockwave this team needs, because of how much players do love Chris Jones. Like Rick Lawler, I think, said it early in the press conference that Chris Jones didn't lose the locker room. And no. I would never question that Chris Jones losing a locker room too, because of just how much players love him. So maybe that's the shockwave that goes through this organization, at least the players want.
Matt, maybe, and that's a great attribute to have as a coach, is to have the buy-in and the love and appreciation from your players. That's hard to get, but sometimes you get too comfortable. I don't know. I'm not close enough to the room to know how much comfort there was from both sides.
Yeah.
But sometimes there is a comfort level there, and it takes some of the edge off. Again, reiterating, I don't know if that's the case here, but now that comfort level, I would assume, has changed. For the better or for the worse, we will see with the results on the field starting on Friday. But that's something that could be part of it, is if there were guys who were like, I'm Chris Jones's boy, he brought me here to do something, he's paying me to do that, I know I'm good, I've got 3 strikes before I'm out. That's gone, I think. It could be gone, because there's a different mentality. You're not Chris Jones's boy anymore, because Chris Jones isn't here. Maybe you're Jarious Jackson's guy. Maybe you're not. Maybe you have to win over Jarious Jackson. But that is something to keep an eye on, and I would assume would be a factor.
Well, I can confidently say that there is no comfort in that locker room right now.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the pieces that were brought in by Coach Jones, and those are some of the pieces that have been letting this team down on a regular basis. You look at Javon Leake and his, he's had fumble issues at costly times. Boris Beattie has been not worth the value.
Night last night.
He has not been worth he's getting paid to play football.
Yeah.
McLeod Bethel Thompson has been okay. He's certainly not the guy that's taking them to victory. You alluded to it on the Hangout of a former great in Michael Riley, that he would get his hands on the ball in the fourth quarter, and you knew that game was in hand. We don't see that killer instinct from this team, and a shakeup like this might just be what the doctor ordered. Now, it might take a few more tweaks, as both of them alluded to, in order to snap this locker room in the right direction. But it should be an interesting week, albeit a short week. But I think this team's going to have a little bit of a different attitude going into Ottawa on Friday night.
And maybe if you go pull off a victory, I'm not saying because of Trey Ford, but if Trey Ford gets a couple plays in there, that home game against Hamilton, maybe it's easier to sell some tickets too, because that's part of all of this too.
Yeah, we said it throughout that this is now, and Rick Lawlisher said this was a Rick Lawlisher move.
Mm-hmm.
This was nobody else. This was his move, but it was based off of the organization and their commitment to the fans, to the people that sit in the seats behind us. This was a decision made based on that. So he has, thankfully, been able to do that and make a tough decision at a tough time as well, given that it's a short week. But yes, this was something that organizationally they needed. They really needed to do to get not only their team focused in the right direction, but their supporters.
Yeah, that's a big part. That's a huge part of it. Good point.
Boys, excellent work. Thank you very much for heading down to Commonwealth. Excellent. We're looking forward to the one-on-ones you have, Tommy, and excellent job in the press conference. I'll let you guys go. Dusty's going to join me momentarily here, so we'll get his thoughts. He just woke up from a nap. He said he woke up to 74 missed texts. So yeah, I was about to say, when I was gonna wrap up with you guys, I'd be like, hey, great work by everyone at EST, but Dusty, because he was the only one that hasn't responded to anything yet. But will I get him right away? But boys, excellent job. Tommy, you and I will talk a lot more about this tomorrow on the Hangout.
Yes, we will, Maddie. Thanks for having us.
There's Jay Milne, Tom Gazzola down at Commonwealth Stadium. They were there for the press conferences. Rick Lawlisher, interim general manager Jarious Jackson, or Geroy Simon, and interim head coach Jarious Jackson spoke to the media as the Edmonton Elks today parted ways with general manager head coach Chris Jones. He was hired in December of 2021, 833 record over the 2+ seasons. 4-14 in 22, 4-14 last season, 0-5 to start this season. And as Rick Lawlisher said, this team is better today, but ultimately this is a results-based business, and the wins are not there. A lot of fans were frustrated in the Green and Gold postgame show yesterday. I was frustrated myself. So was Jay Milne, and went with, you're probably at a point where a coaching change is going to be necessary, or a GM and a coaching change is going to be necessary. Ultimately, I will say this: it's the general manager is where I think I'm going to be more frustrated from than the head coach. That the general manager didn't build a proper roster, didn't build a proper team, and that hurts the head coach maybe of this team. But when the job is held by the same individual, he's got to pay double the price. We'll just quickly throw out there what Farhan Lalji has also said for those that are just tuning in. And Rick Lawlisher said the first part of this as well. This was a Rick Lawlisher decision, but he did go to the board to inform of this decision, as well as the prospective new owners. Farhan Lalji of TSN adding the prospective new Elks owners did sign off on this move to fire Chris Jones. So they agreed with it in the end, but it was, again, Rick Lawlisher's decision, but the new owners who are potentially going to take over did sign off on this. And contractually, the team's obligated to pay Jones 12 months from the date of termination. That so means only 5/18 of his salary will apply to the cap. And Farhan Lalji also adding that he expects the Elks the next time around to split GM and head coaching roles. This time around, it was dual role to Chris Jones, partly because they needed to save money, because they were cleaning house in such a big way with Jamie Elizondo, Brock Sunderland. They needed to save money, and that's why Chris Jones was brought in ultimately ahead of anyone else to take over, because you got a guy who could do two roles for a little bit of a cheaper price. You ready to go, Zach, bringing him over? Let's bring in Dustin Nielson onto the show, host of The Nielson Show here on Edmonton Sports Talk, 6 until 9. What are you laughing about, Dusty, there?
You try to sleep for a couple hours and all hell breaks loose. I laid down at 2:35.
Yes, that's you're just missed 25 minutes.
And yeah, I lay down at 2:35 and I wake up to 74 missed texts. I was like, oh my God, did someone die? What's going on? And then, yeah, great work, boys. Wow. I wasn't, we mentioned this morning, I was like, it feels highly unlikely, but does Rick Lawlisher just decide to do it? And I guess we have our answer today.
Well, I was on at 2:35 with Jamie and I out in Regina, And he said, are any changes coming? I went, well, it's the afternoon. No, it would have happened today by now. Wouldn't have it? Like, it's a short week. They're on Friday. And then 25 minutes later, I'm just sitting there and boop, there's the press release and the change happens. Ultimately, this change probably should happen. But are you surprised that it ultimately did happen?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that they actually decided to do it. Now, you did mention there that Farhan said that, that the new prospective owner did give the green light on this. And that was kind of the hesitation that I think we all had, that, were you going to have to wait until a new owner came in to pull the trigger on this? I mean, that's essentially kind of what happened here. They have their prospective owner in place, managed to get approval from them to do it. So they decided, why wait any longer? I mean, it's a shame that you just didn't do it after the fourth game. So you would have had a bye week to allow whatever sort of mini transition you're going to see going to Jarious Jackson as an interim head coach. So
and save one more week on the salary.
Yeah, then he would have been done 4/18 into next year.
Not
guess.
5/18.
Yeah. So, but look, I mean, this is obviously how bad the Elks view it has gotten with the fan base. That it simply had to happen. I mean, we saw people this morning, and we had a heavy Elk show this morning, and we'll have a heavy Elk show tomorrow morning. But we saw people today being like, if Chris Jones is coaching this team, and one guy texted and say, I've been a season, the classic, I've been a season ticket holder forever line. He goes, but if Chris Jones is coaching this team on Friday, I'm done. And I don't know, maybe there was more of those out there, and they're just like, screw it. It has to happen. It can't be any worse. So I don't know how much better it'll be, but it can't be any worse. And we'll see what ends up happening for this team moving forward.
What's the biggest downfall of Chris Jones in this second tenure with the Edmonton Elks?
My goodness. You know what I'll probably say is not going out and getting veterans on defense. But I know there's a lot of different things you can look at, and the whole not sticking with Trey Ford and paying MBT. But prior to trying to bring in Oakman and Moncrief, who I think will eventually work out pretty well, they brought in Purifoy. And that's it in the last 2 years. Like, Kai Gray looks good, but he's only in his second year. Darius Braden, only in his second year. Marcus Lewis is like kind of in his third year, but doesn't really have that much experience as well. They're starting Cordell Jackson as a rookie. They started this year with Niles Morgan, who we all love, and he's legit, but they started him with O'Neill on one side and Anderson on the other, who were two more rookies. They move out Serezna and had to wait till they started 0-4 to bring in Oakman. Like, they never, ever, ever in the last 2 years brought in any veteran CFL experience, with the exception of Purifoy, on the defensive side of the ball. And the defensive side of the ball is a train wreck. And like, some of those guys do look like they could play in this league, but they don't look like they'll be ready to make an impact in this league for like 3-4 years in addition to what they've already done. So I do think in the end, the downfall is probably the fact that as a general manager, he just decided to go with, a bunch of athletes that he thought he could mold into a good defense overall. And it never came to be. Like, I do think some of those guys will play in this league for a long time, but they failed miserably, being inexperienced over the last couple of years, and ended up costing him his job.
Yeah, if I said it just before, Brett, you wanted it. To me, it's general manager Chris Jones cost head coach Chris Jones's job.
I mean, that's basically what I'm saying here too, right? Yeah. Like, he
didn't bring enough the right players and the mix of players to go win football games. And
he brought in Purifoy, who he was familiar with.
Yeah.
And then everybody else was essentially a no-name on defense that they brought in. And I mean, you look at some of these teams around the league, like look at Ottawa. They went and brought in a Darius Pickett. That guy's a game changer. He was all over the field yesterday. Like, you can go out and find these veteran guys. And he never seemed like, I don't even know how many times, and you don't hear this a lot in the CFL, like you would in other leagues, like, oh, Chris Jones was in on this guy defensively, and Chris Jones was in on this guy defensively. So you don't hear that a lot. Maybe they were, but they didn't land any of them outside of a guy that he was familiar with who wears a funny mask. Like, they didn't get any of them. And in the end, that's the downfall. If they were able to add another veteran linebacker next to Niles Morgan, so Niles Morgan didn't have to come on Zoom calls with us all the time, who's 3 years into his career and is like, I'm a veteran on this team. You're like, this poor guy, he's a phenomenal talent, but there's been way too much on his shoulders. So, offensively, they did good things. I mean, we talked about on the Hangout today. They have a great offensive receiver group.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could also look at failure to build a legitimate offensive line. I mean, nothing against a lot of those guys, but I mean, the offensive line has not been good.
It really has not been addressed throughout the entire time.
No,
of Chris
not
Jones
really.
here.
They've kind of
You could have made the argument going into almost any free agency. Hey, the Elks need to go get offensive linemen, and they didn't go do it.
Yeah, like he always just seemed to go with a Band-Aid solution on the offensive line, like guys who other teams didn't want anymore. And it didn't work. I mean, you are right, and I don't want to take anything away from Coach Chris Jones because he didn't do anything that successful either. But General Manager Chris Jones really failed to address some key area. Think about the other teams that have success. Like, I know it's tough to compare anybody to Winnipeg over the last few years because they've done such a good job at it. But if you look at their defense, right down the spine, it's Brandon Alexander, 8 years. It's Adam Bighill, who's been 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. And then their 2 bookends on the D-line forever up until this year was Jeff Coate and it was Willie Jefferson. I mean, those are just veteran. If you go look at Edmonton right now. I mean, they have Purifoy, who's in that safety spot. Niles Morgan has like 3, maybe 4 years. And then they're very raw on the defensive end. So, I mean, there's some key areas that he didn't address. And, I mean, you talked about it in the offseason. I know what they were trying to accomplish with McLeod Bethel-Thompson. What we've seen so far this year, they don't necessarily have a quarterback problem. But from a payroll management situation, a lot of that money could have been spent either on the offensive line or going out and getting a Darius Pickett or going out and getting some of these other guys who moved in the offseason. Like, BC Lions managed to bring in a couple of veterans defensively this year. I mean, it's possible. And he just
look at Saskatchewan. Look at how Saskatchewan has a little bit of a turnaround right now. You know, they weren't look, they started off last year quite well, but then wheels fell out. But they weren't this fantastic football team last year that, you know, we go into this season. They made some really nice moves all over the place. You know, the highlight would be AJ Ouellette, but, you know, they brought in Hardrick on the offensive line. They brought in some defenders. And, you know, also credit to Corey Mace, a different coach and his style.
Yeah, but they brought in
look
Jameer
at how
Thurman.
good they are.
Like,
right?
They brought in Jameer Thurman. Like, Roland Milligan, I think, is an absolute stud. He was hurt 4 games into the season. I think he changes a lot for them. He might be the best defensive player for me, and he's a halfback. Like, he's phenomenal. But they managed to bring in Jameer Thurman. They managed to change the way that people look at their defense a little bit. BC lost Matthew Betts, managed to go out and get Pete Robertson. Like, there's veteran guys who are out there that either his cap was so screwed that he couldn't actually financially afford to get any of them. And if that's the case, then why would you spend as much as you did on a quarterback when you have a guy that potentially could be really good? Or B, he just thought that he was too smart in the analyzing of defensive talent and decided to go cheap. And
he spent the money again on the receiving corps. And after last season, when they had Dylan Mitchell, they had Steven Dunbar, they had Eugene Lewis, and then there was guys like, you know, Manny Arsenault, and then they had a few other guys. But they had the money in those first 3. And I think we all left through last season going, you don't need all that money on the receiving corps. You could open up. And they cut Steven Dunbar. But then they go bring in Curly Gittins for Jake Serezna. And that's this whole roster construction. I don't want to rip. You know, Curly Gittins has actually been a really good receiver for
I love Curly Gittins. He's a great player, right?
Right, he is. But look at what you got with Hergy Mayala. That you like in the sense you didn't need Gittins. They have an unreal receiving corps. But they've put so much to this receiving corps that it's hurting the other spots. And then it's the whole roster construction that Chris Jones has had, that it's been there since this free agency. It's been laid out there that it's not properly constructed. And that's why it's not a surprise, I think, to a lot of people that this team is ultimately 0-5. Because it was betting Chris Jones on, can he go find those guys? And to a degree, yeah, you'd like to have made that bet. But it was a huge gamble. And Chris Jones's gamble, it cost him his job.
I don't know, like, just getting up to speed here. Don't know how much you guys already talked about after the nap. But how does this immediately help the team, do you think?
Yeah, and Jay, Tommy, and I were kind of going into this. The one way I'll look at that is players love playing for Chris Jones. Players absolutely love being with Chris Jones, and now that group has to look at themselves and go, the coach we love playing for lost his job because we weren't always sharp. We were making those little mistakes. We're kicking the ball out of bounds. Does that just kick them in the butt just enough that going into Friday against Ottawa, they have just a little bit more focus? Is that the thing where Chris Jones has been now around some of these guys you've mentioned? He's been around some of these players, maybe not all in Edmonton, but around some of these people with the coaching staff, that a little comfortable, that there weren't fully those consequences that were necessary. Is that maybe the change that you're going to get for Friday? Obviously, as you're waking up from the nap, you wouldn't have heard the full press conferences. Geroy and Jarious Jackson both talking about how, don't expect immediate changes coming here. Like they're going to go with this team, and as they should. But that's maybe the one expectation I would like to think is that this team gets the kick in the butt because a coach that they really like playing for is now no longer there. The other thing of note that you'll want to go, I guess Tommy has a one-on-one with Jarious Jackson that we'll have to tune into a little bit later because I guess he hinted at it a lot. But at the end, he was asked who's his starting quarterback. He said McLeod Bethel Thompson. But then he hinted that that doesn't mean that Trey Ford can't get out there. And he didn't say Trey Ford, but he said he liked all three quarterbacks. And he kind of hinted that you might see Trey Ford get in there a little bit more. So if there's a reason, if we could point to one person maybe as to why Trey Ford hasn't gone in sort of packages even, I think based on the press conferences and the upcoming one-on-one with Tommy and Jarious Jackson, things are pointing that it's Chris Jones' decision that's why it didn't happen. And Jarious Jackson maybe is not as agreeing with that and might try something different.
I'll be interested to see how that works out because we did a Zoom call with Chris Jones, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks into the season. As you know, my best friend and broadcast partner, Glenn Suter's a huge Trey Ford guy. So he's asking about that. And Chris did say that Trey didn't want to be like a gimmick guy. Maybe that's just Chris Jones's way of avoiding, a little bit more of a discussion on that. Maybe Jarious Jackson has a few packages that they want to go on and want to get in, and maybe Trey's totally on board for doing something like that. It is a little bizarre. And once again, their offense is really good, but it is a little bizarre how he hasn't touched the ball at any point throughout the entire season. When you see the Bombers, I will say this. The Bombers offense got a lot better when they stopped working gimmicky stuff to Chris Streveler in last week.
But the key is gimmicky.
What's that?
The key word there was gimmicky stuff.
Yeah. And I was asking people on the way to Princess Auto Stadium. I was talking to Dunnigan. I said, do you think the Bombers offense is being held back a bit this year because every 7th play they forced the ball to Streveler for some reason? And he goes, I think that could probably be the case. And then Streveler only handles like 2 short yardage plays, and the Bombers hang 41 on Calgary. So I do think you have to be a little bit careful on how much you decide to take an offense that's in rhythm off the field. But at the same time, I mean, how can you not have success with Trey Ford for a series, even if you want to go there? So this team has the ability to give a significantly different look at times to just throw defenses off, and maybe that helps MBT when he's in there at quarterback. Once again, I mean, if their defense continues to play the way it has,
it doesn't
matter. They're
going
nowhere anyway. So we'll see what that happens. Interim tag on Jarious and full-blown general manager tag on Geroy. Is that what ended up happening?
I thought they were all interims.
Are they all interim? I thought I saw something.
No, Geroy's the interim general manager. Jarious is the interim head coach. Geroy was asked, how long till they hire a full-time head coach or something, and he didn't. He basically said they're not looking at that. I'd be stunned if he's allowed to hire a head coach. I've outlined this. It's probably the next step is we're gonna have that press conference with the new ownership. They'll either at that press conference or the next press conference announce a president, and then that president's going to evaluate everything, including who's going to be the next general manager and head coach of this team. But this is a spot for Jarious Jackson and Geroy Simon to go earn that job.
Yeah, I got a little bit of time for Geroy being ready for a general manager position in the Canadian Football League. You're not going to take an interim tag off Jarious Jackson next year and make him your head coach. I mean, they've got to find a better option.
Are you sure
at that spot?
What if they go out and I don't know how many games left. They've played 5 games, so that leaves 13 games left this season. What if they go 8-5 the rest of this way?
I mean, okay.
That's where Jarious has a chance to, I think, go earn this job. If this team goes and plays above 500 football, how do you just walk away from him at that point? I think that you've got to give him like a 2-year contract potentially.
Yeah. I mean,
it's the John Schneider Blue Jays situation, I feel, where John Schneider replaced, who did he replace? John Gibbons.
Well, whatever you do there, don't follow that.
No, I don't know, but he came in and they did so well that he kept the interim job, or he became the full-time head coach.
Which ended up being a horrible decision because they suck and their team's nothing but going worse and worse and worse. So don't get me started on the Blue Jays. Let's just stick with the Elks for a second. Like, I don't, in a regular situation, maybe. I mean, if he takes them on an all-time tear and they get into the playoffs and win a bloody playoff game, sure, he's going to earn it. But for new ownership to come in, if you're trying to win people back and just saying we're going to keep the guy who was promoted from OC, I think you're missing a huge opportunity to get some brownie points with the fans there.
Well, I would say then that's probably the same thing with GM.
Yeah, okay, that's
I think just the brand new, like, almost.
I mean, Lawlisher will have a good read on this. Lawlisher will have a good read on Geroy, and what, like, if Geroy Simon was in part responsible for building their offense, then I think that carries a lot of sway. I mean, they've got. It sounds crazy, but I still think they've got one of the best receiving corps in the Canadian Football League. They've got a guy who ran for 1,100 yards last year. And now you turn the organization over to the guy who was calling those plays and the guy who may have been more focused on bringing in the offensive side of the ball. So maybe,
but we also said that
it does work.
The defense is the reason that if they can't figure out defense, they're not going anywhere. Can Geroy go find defenders?
I mean, it's more of, can he clean up the mistakes that the previous guy left for him, right? That's going to be a tough job to do in the middle of the season in the Canadian. Yeah,
but I'm even thinking like going into next year. I'm thinking even going into next year. Like, if you're that new president, if you're Rick Lawlisher, you got to evaluate Geroy Simon and also go, can this guy, like, as great as, okay, sure, he might be the big reason for this offense. He wouldn't have been as big of a reason for the defense because you would have to expect Chris Jones's. But is this a guy that could go fix those calls? But is he a guy that could go find those players? Because that's the failure of this season right now. If we had a ranking, it starts with the defense.
Yeah. I mean,
congratulations to whoever buys this team.
Did you say congratulations?
Yes, to whoever buys this team. Just
one of the reasons I look to Geroy, and I'll have to look at the exact date on this. But did Geroy come over after Lawlisher came back, or did he come over before?
No, he was right away.
Came back.
He was hired with Chris Jones.
Okay. And that was pre-Lawlisher, right? Rick didn't make this call. He came in and tried to clean up the mess.
Yeah, no.
Timeline correct. So
December 28th, 2021. Chris Jones was hired in 21. He was named the assistant general manager of the Elks. Rick Lawlisher took over midway through last season.
Okay, so I don't know. Lawlisher did a great job getting BC back on track. Mm-hmm. Geroy Simon was with BC for a stretch of that. So there's a pre-Elks tie with Lawlisher and Geroy.
But it's not up to Geroy. Or it's not up to Rick Lawlisher.
No.
It's going to be up to the next person. It can't be up to Rick Lawlisher.
Lawlisher will be a sounding board.
Sure.
Lawlisher is going to help handpick the next president. He's obviously helping with the ownership. He's going to have a large say in a lot of this, and he should. He's very good at what he does. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm also looking at, we were talking this morning about different head coaches you could look at. We didn't really get into the different general managers you could look at. So that's something we can probably dive into a bit tomorrow. It'd be a heavy show tomorrow on the Elks for sure.
I can't imagine why. I can't imagine.
You know the name we brought up today? I don't know if you guys talked about it, but Chris Morris. I mean, you'd have to have the coordinators in place, but Chris Morris took over a program that was a joke.
Yeah.
And turned them into a program that churns out. And it wasn't quick. He put in 12 years or whatever it's been to the Golden Bears, sucked for the first 6 he was there. I remember reading texts of people who were like, what are they doing? Fire this guy. And now the Golden Bears are turning out guys in the CFL draft every single year. They become a bit of an offensive line factory. I got some time, especially if you're trying to reconnect fans from a previous era. I do have some time for that. And I was joking this morning, like, I remember the very first time we had Chris on. like 12 years ago or whatever it was. I remember joking after, because it was such a good chat. I remember joking after that I was going to quit radio and go try to redshirt for his team. Like I was going to be like, you know what, I'm 31, but I'm coming to play for you. So, I mean, I from a culture perspective, I think that's a guy who could reestablish things. From a CFL experience, he doesn't have any as a coach, but Chris Jones had a lot, and how'd that work out?
Yeah,
so,
but how often does a U Sport coach come up and it hasn't had that much success?
I do think Chris is a little bit different.
I know, but it is also very different just, going and signing players contract-wise and going into kids' living rooms and trying to convince them to come play for the U of A.
Yeah, I mean, but that he's not the general manager.
Oh,
that's
a good point.
GM,
that's a
right?
really
you're
good
selling
point,
them you're trying to sell them on a guy who turned around a university program. Oh, and by the way, was one of the best ever at what he did in the Canadian Football League.
That's actually a really good point.
Right? So I don't know. I got some time for Chris, obviously. I've had a soft spot for Morris for over a decade. I think he's a great guy, and he obviously, I mean, maybe he's just meant to be, his background and stuff, maybe just meant to be a university coach. But as far as reestablishing, if you believe that reestablishing the Eskimo way is a thing, and a lot of people do, and there's probably, at least I would think they give him a call and see what's up. Because I mean, who are we looking at for head coach around the league? I guess you look at the same names like Mark Killam down in Calgary again. Yeah. You try to look at elevating a Buck Pierce.
Buck Pierce would be a big one
out of Winnipeg. Like
I throw a Kahari Jones.
There's a few guys there.
I'll throw a Kahari. I think he needs another shot at being a head coach in this league.
And I did like Kahari. He's a great guy too.
Yeah, like there's a guy I think deserves another crack. I would have thrown Jason Shivers, but the defense has been so awful this year. I think that's why he's also not the interim head coach. I would have went this season that he would have been the interim, but the defense has been so bad that's where Jarious Jackson gets elevated. I would have to look at the other coordinators in the league.
Yeah, I know Killam's been a guy that's been mentioned a couple of times in other places.
And I always go, the fact that somebody's been mentioned so many times has never got the job, there's a reason for that.
Yeah. I mean, for Mark
situation
down there, he's assistant coach / special teams, right? He hasn't been an offensive or defensive coordinator, so maybe that's a little bit of a different angle to look at. But man, it's going to be fun. I mean,
Jordan McSimic, Ryan Phillips from BC.
Both Ryan Phillips has more experience, but now Max Simic has ties to the organization already, right? Like the fact that Rourke blew up and then VA's career completely took off. Max Simic, he's got a lot to work with, but you would have a lot to work with offensively here if you did bring in a guy like that.
Jordan McSimic with Trey Ford.
I mean, that'd be fun. But we'll see where it goes. Now, I guess new ownership takes over, and then they have the off season to decide. So, no rush on this thing.
Nope.
Man, I'm surprised they did it. I thought they might. I thought they might just ride it out until the ownership's in place. I guess if ownership signed off on it, it's no difference now. We'll see. I mean, how many people? And this is why I always call out bandwagon fans, but how many people have said, yeah, once Chris Jones is gone, I'll be there. Well, let's see the attendance when Hamilton's in town on July 28th, because they've followed through on one of your wishes. Time to step up.
They need one more. I think they need one more.
I
think they need one more thing.
The quarterback thing.
I think that's what ultimately. I don't think because I don't think Chris
I also
Jones.
don't think that necessarily automatically brings fans out either. I mean, they just say that.
If Trey Ford gets in the lineup and wins a couple of football games, it brings fans out.
Yeah.
If McLeod Bethel Thompson wins some football games, it brings fans out, but I don't think it brings as many fans out. Because Trey Ford gets the casual.
I mean, wins or wins.
100%.
Should be wins.
I know, but the casual fan got excited by Trey Ford.
Yeah,
that's the difference, and that's where, as long as Trey Ford is still a part of this organization in the end, there's going to be that hope of Trey Ford for those some people.
Like if you need to trick casual fans into coming just because Trey Ford's there, then have at her, I guess. Like offensively, they're very fun to watch. These games have been all time exciting. If they had won their last 3 games by a field goal, people would be like, this is the most exciting team to watch in the Canadian Football League.
But they didn't.
Instead, they just blow it.
They didn't.
So, I mean, the BC Lions are the most exciting team to watch in the Canadian Football League. But still, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I don't think a great crowd is back at Commonwealth until they're 3 games above 500 at some point next season.
Well,
that happens.
I look at it.
I truly believe that's what it'll take.
Well, it's just last season even. I think even just a good winning streak. It was Ottawa, and then there was the 2 Labor Days. They were 3-4 through that. That third game, or that Labor Day game, the rematch, they were 2-1 going into it. There's 31,000 at Commonwealth. Like, you just have to go rattle off a couple wins in a row. You know, you and then maybe you can get people out there. I don't know. It's Ottawa, Hamilton, Saskatchewan, BC. I think BC's here in Edmonton. You go take, 2 of the next 3 type thing, and then that BC game, maybe there's a little more excitement. Maybe there's a little bit of buzz. So, Dusty, thanks for jumping on. Great coverage today, boys. Yeah,
I plan on going back to watch all of it.
And I'm very excited to watch the one-on-one that Tommy's going to have with Jarious Jackson whenever that gets posted. You, Eric, YouTube, Trev, you'll have full coverage 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. More on this, more fallout and reaction. I will have it on the Hangout. But thank you, Dusty, and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Get a little bit more sleep.
Yeah, well, I got to go barbecue for the family. So talk to you later. Good job, Matty.
See you tomorrow. There's Dustin Nielson, host of The Nielson Show, featuring Lieutenant Eric. 6 a.m. right here on Edmonton Sports Talk, Monday through Friday. Matt Iwanyk is Zach to come with you here as we will wrap up shortly here. Our breaking coverage of Chris Jones being relieved of his duties as head coach and general manager of the Edmonton Elks. Geroy Simon is the interim general manager. Jarious Jackson is the interim head coach. Next up for the Elks Friday, they're in Ottawa to take on the Red Blacks. Green and Gold kickoff show live from Century Casino Sports Bar and Lounge with myself, Matt Iwanyk, and Jay Milne. That will take place 4 o'clock right here on Edmonton Sports Talk on Friday. A lot more coverage of this over the course of the next few days. Obviously, Rick Lawlisher, he made it clear earlier that he made this decision. He alone made this decision for this season and not ready to throw this season away, although he did go to the board. He did go to the new prospective owners of this team and did get their, gave them the heads up, and they signed off on it as well, allowing him to go ahead and do this. As Farhan Lalji of TSN also reporting for people focused on the coach's cap, Chris Jones's contract he gets paid 12 months following the termination date. So today is the termination date. So next season, 5/18 of his contract will be towards next year's coaching cap. So not a full hit next season. We will see what the Edmonton Elks, though, do, the players and this new coaching staff, as I said, on Friday when I take on the Ottawa Red Blacks. Big thank you to Zach Tickham. He did a fantastic job behind the camera here. Well done, Zach. It was a little bit wild. You had never done before playing live audio as it was, so it was a little clunky there, but I didn't show you that until literally seconds before we went on the air. But we got the audio out there, so good job to you, Zach. Thanks to Lieutenant Eric for jumping on. Thanks to Tommy and Jay for getting down to Commonwealth Stadium, as well as getting in those press conferences and Tommy getting those one-on-ones. Thanks to Dusty for finally waking up from his nap and joining us here, but mostly thank you to all of you for tuning in to Edmonton Sports Talk, your clear choice for Edmonton sports, whether it be on TuneIn, iHeart, on EdmontonSportsTalk.com or YouTube. Thanks for jumping on with us with this breaking coverage of the coaching and GM change of the Edmonton Elks. I'm Matt Iwanyk. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. We'll have more on this starting 6 o'clock tomorrow morning with the Nielson Show featuring Lieutenant Eric. Have a good night.